In 1940, National Geographic magazine published reports of a group of 30 children led by their teacher, who went into a site in Malta called the Hypogeum of Hal Saliani. The Hypogeum is a series of underground monolithic structures, rooms, and tunnels. You could at this time walk from one end to the other end of the Hypogeum. When the kids and the teacher went in, they, wanting to be safe, tied a firm rope to the entrance and roped all the children together. When they went in, they never returned. Near an entrance to the deepest cave, the rope was found cut clean. They were never found. According to the citizens of Malta, the children that ventured into the Hypogeum were never found. But during their immediate disappearance, the people heard wailing from deep underground for several weeks in different parts of the island. The wailing could never be located to where it was coming from. The only official story of this event is that the children and a teacher had entered a tunnel, which had caved in just as the last one made it through. Of course, there was no evidence of a cave-in, and there are no surviving official news reports. Was there a cover-up? What really happened to these children and the teacher? What caused the wailing the people heard? Lois Jessup was a British government employee who had traveled to Malta in the mid-1930s on a guided tour. These events were published in two documents. One was in Crabbe's Borderland Science magazine by the Borderline Science Research Foundation, and the other a 1961 first-hand account printed in the Journal of Borderland Research. On one hot afternoon while in Malta, Jessup and her friends decided it would be fun to go underground and do some exploring. They discovered the Hypogeum and found a guide at the entrance who would take them in. She claimed the entrance smelled damp and moldy, but this went away once they entered the cave. Joe, who was their guide, gave each of the party members a lighted candle. They proceeded to one by one bend down low to walk through a narrow passage. The group proceeded to travel through the Hypogeum and through the different rooms, first hitting the oracle room where their voices became amplified, then to another chamber which appeared to be an altar with what looks like beds carved into the wall, and from there they found the deepest sanctioned chamber. In this chamber the walls were cut open with slits, one of which Jessup looked through and saw a giant pile of bones and skeletons and skulls. The guide said that on one side was a massive burial site and the other side was a prison. This is when Joe, the tour guide, said that it was time to leave. He told everyone they had to go back the way they came. But it was then that Jessup saw something. She saw another opening off one of the walls and asked Joe, "What was down there?" Joe replied, "Go there at your own risk and you won't go far." Jessup, being much too curious, decided she wanted to explore further. So she tied her dress sash around her waist and gave the other end to 3 of her friends. Her other 2 friends remained back with the guide. They walked down a dark hallway with just their candles lighting their way, Jessup in the lead, and when she came to a ledge pathway about 2 feet wide with a sheer drop about 50 feet or more, she went to take a step forward. Her friend directly behind her hadn't reached this area and had not seen the drop in the area Jessup was in. She started thinking perhaps this was too steep of a drop and they should go no further without the guide, and she held up her candle, and that's when she saw something. Across from her, from an opening of deep below, there emerged 20 large humans, as she described them as giants. They walked in a single file along a narrow ledge. She judged them to be about 20 or 25 feet since she said their heads came up about halfway the opposite wall. They walked very slowly, taking long strides. And when suddenly they all stopped, turned and raised their heads in her direction. All simultaneously raised their arms and with their hands beckoned her. She claimed it was like they were grasping her, trying to snatch something, palms face down. She was filled with terror and she was frozen in her spot. Her candle was in her right hand and she raised her left hand to the wall to steady her. But her hand didn't touch cold rock. It touched something soft and wet. Then a strong wind came from nowhere and blew out her candle. Panicked, she told her friends to go back and to guide her back with her sash. They arrived back at the large room with her friends and the tour guide. When her friends asked if she saw anything, she quickly said no, and the tour guide exchanged knowing looks with Jessup and told everyone it's time to go. She decided she wasn't going to talk about it with anyone, and just as they were about to leave, the tour guide pulled her aside and privately told her if she wants to explore further, that he can put her in touch with a school teacher who was planning a group to go and explore. Jessup took her information. Time went on and she never heard from the school teacher. In 1940, she got a call from one of the friends that went with her that day, that had just read the National Geographic article about the missing teacher and the school children, saying they got to where we got to, but they said the walls caved in on them. She decided she wanted to go back and see this place again. When she arrived, there was a different guide. When going through, she reached the tunnel entrance to where she had her experience, and it was boarded up and sealed off. She asked this new guide if this is where the teacher and her school children got trapped, to which the guide merely said, "Perhaps." She asked him if he was new and where Joe was, and the guide says he doesn't know any Joe and that he was the only guide who has been working the site for years. Her description of the giants were of shaggy-looking large humans with long white hair combed downwards, elongated chin and skull, their hair falling to the shoulders. So what do we make of this? Could there be a race of giants living underground in Malta? The white hair makes sense that if an underground entity were to live without sun and in the dark, that their hair would lose pigmentation. Also, the single file walking, slow walking, and reaching out almost snatching like would suggest that the vision would be minimal, if anything at all. This is consistent with an underground or primary tunnel or cave-dwelling species. The elongated skull is an oddity, but in some of the local ancient findings, elongated skulls have been recovered in this area, suggesting that maybe the humans there binded their skulls to mimic these giants. The room that housed what archaeologists say contained about 7,000 human remains were reported upon examination to not have had the flesh decomposed off the bones, but ripped off of them. Also, the paintings on the tomb would have eroded from the wall, which suggests that the flesh did not decompose, but perhaps were consumed. The original excavation, however, claimed that there was more like 60,000 humans, mostly humans. So either a gross miscalculation or some of the remains were lost. To this day, although a lot of these bones and skulls were on display, they have since removed a lot of them from displays, and they have apparently disappeared for some reason, a lot of them being the elongated skulls. There was another smaller hypogeum in Malta that was never fully excavated, but contained more skeletal remains. It was quickly reburied and covered up. Another site was found and reburied after excavation, which later, when re-excavation, found 200,000 bones from human skeletons. A paper was released that discussed the findings of charred remains of infants found underground in Malta, suggesting that human sacrifices had been occurring there. In 2012, a stela from the 6th century BC was translated saying, "To the Holy Lord Saturn, Baal Haman, a great sacrifice of nighttime, Sacrum Magnum Nocturnum, Molokamar, or Moloch, breath for breath, blood for blood, life for life." And here was our first foray into magic. Incantations to demons with human and or animal sacrifice in order to obtain some flavor with that entity. Magic, it appears, over and over to be a common theme amongst our ancient relatives. Human and animal sacrifice, a rather brutish form of it, and at least from our modern perspective, perhaps a more desperate form of magic. We could ponder the possibility of a hidden knowledge of magic passed down from a previous to us unknown civilization, that perhaps to some degree was mistranslated or lost through translation. Or it's possible that things like harvest and protection from enemies or the elements became so desperate that more and more extreme forms of rituals seemed to be demanded to obtain results. That or the desperation that an empire that grew large enough, in their eyes, needed greater sacrifice not from an individual, but in order to perform magic for a culture, needed sacrifice from the culture as a whole. Could this desperation be to keep these underground giants, who would seem like Titan-like demons from the underground, from coming up and tormenting them, keeping the giants fed with human sacrifices? The steps of the lowest chamber of the hypogeum was built with uneven steps, with a large sudden significant drop that seems like it was designed to cripple those that stumbled down it. In 2004, a cameraman who went down these stairs fell down this drop and broke his leg. The area below was designed to be like a large funnel leading into a pit that a hobbled human wouldn't be able to escape from. There's a long-standing historical stories that go back in ancient times around Malta, that the large megalithic structures were once built by large giants that ruled that land. Eventually it is said that they all died off and the lone survivor, a female giant by the name of Sansuna, finished the rest of these structures, only facing her demise when pirates stole her children that she had with a human. She chased the pirates out into the sea where she drowned after the pirates stabbed and cut her hands from the boat. Is it possible these giants didn't die off, but for some reason decided to go underground and live the rest of their lives down there? Could there still be giants down there? And why the tunnel to them is sealed off? Only an open and transparent excavation of this closed area might determine this. But what do you think? Let me know in the comments below. Please like, share, and subscribe to this channel. It really helps us out. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll talk to you next time.